like an infallible, foul-mouthed human-devil hybrid who's a sucker for justice and loves pizza? If your answer was no, then you probably shouldn't watch this video, because that's the exact description of the man we're going to be talking about today. There are several half-blood demon hunters in the world of fiction, but none are as compelling or relatable as Dante from the Devil May Cry franchise. But what exactly does being half-human and half-devil mean for his physiology, and how does that inform his personality? We'll be answering all those questions and more in this video, so without further ado, let's get right into it. What does being half-human, half-demon actually mean for his body? Like most ultra-powerful halflings in fiction, Dante was born from an unholy union. He's the son of a human woman called Eva and Sparta, the greatest and most powerful knight that the Netherworld has ever seen. The background for the franchise is set up through Sparta. After serving as one of the top-ranking generals of the Prince of the Netherworld, Sparta one day found his humanity, realized that the tyranny devils like himself visited upon the human world was unjust and cruel. So he used his immense power and immensely powerful sword to defeat the demon army, sever the link between the two worlds, and seal up the demon world with the perfect amulet. He divided it into two halves that he bestowed upon his twin sons, Virgil and Dante. Sparta remained in the human world for close to 2 millennia, even ruling over some of it for a time, before finally marrying Eva and having his children. He was a strict disciplinarian who raised his boys to value the ancient histories and martial arts, and though the elder Virgil took his teachings in stride, younger Dante would often cry. This is where the series gets its name and core conflict from, because devils do not cry, yet Dante does. After the deaths of their parents, the twins get separated. Dante thinks Virgil is dead, and he struggles with what being the son of Sparta actually means, which is the main storyline of the first 3 games. Virgil resolves his trauma by pursuing pure demonic strength and rejecting emotional vulnerability, represented by his weapon of choice, Immortal. He consciously wants to eclipse his father's strength and legacy, which is inverted in his twins' ambitions and ideologies. Dante embraces his humanity, which is embodied by rebellion, his first and most iconic sword, and he struggles to think of himself as the son of a devil. We could spend hours talking about the complete narrative of Devil May Cry because it's just that fascinating, but this is an anatomy video, and the foundation is more necessary than the crenellations. The only reason we laid it out is because it's crucial to understanding how Dante's hybrid nature translates into his physiology. He's not a man with demonic powers, he's a biological contradiction, and every major system in his body operates on 2 overlapping templates, one human, one infernal. The franchise repeatedly implies that his anatomy is neither fully mortal nor fully demonic, but a hybrid physiology capable of shifting priority between those 2 states depending on stress levels, injury, emotion, and identity. He repeatedly chooses human connection despite the suffering attached to it, and the series suggests that that choice is exactly what makes his hybrid body stronger than a pure demon, which is kind of ironic. So now that we've explained Dante's history, let's talk about his physiology. Why doesn't getting shot in the head kill him? Does he actually feel pain or just not care? From a physiological perspective, Dante's human half appears to govern his emotional framework, his sensory systems, and his morality. He bleeds red blood like a human, he eats ordinary food like a human, especially pizza, which he specifically wants every topping on, and he feels emotions like a human. His behavioral habits and traits, which include things like depression, isolation, and using humor to mask his trauma, are fundamentally human responses to the catastrophic loss of his mother, which he still feels heavily despite the years passing by. But that's about as far as Dante's humanity goes, because everything else about his physiology is governed by his demonic half. Dante's body consistently demonstrates capabilities that are impossible for any human organism to achieve. He can resist magical corruption in heat levels that would slough the flesh off of you and I. He can tank severe blunt force trauma like he's stubbing a toe. He possesses immense regenerative capabilities, which allows him to heal wounds that would kill any ordinary person, and most importantly, he turns into a friggin' devil whenever he's pushed over the edge. We'll get to that in a few moments, considering it's the most important thing about his anatomy, but first, let's take a look at some of the greatest demonstrations of his demonic physiology. In DMC 3, Dante is shot in the head by Lady at close range. A headshot of any kind is usually fatal, and one at close range doubly so, but due to his half-demon physiology, he regenerates instantly and shrugs off Lady's attempted murder as just another hazard of the demon hunting trade. The bullet leaves only a temporary red mark on his forehead, and and Dante remains unfazed, which is the most iconic demonstration of his extreme durability and healing factor. If he were a normal man, the bullet would have pierced through his skull and left a hole in his brain, but his demon physiology accelerates cellular growth and tissue regeneration, making his muscular and skeletal structures a lot sturdier than Homo sapiens, and this is the main reason that Dante getting impaled with swords has become less of a mortal crisis for him, more of a running gag. In DMC3 itself, he gets impaled many times, once by his brother with his own blade, yet each fatal injury is nothing more than a flea bite to Dante in terms of physiological recovery. And yes, we know what you're about to say, but stick with us until the end because it will all make sense, we promise. His tenacious survivability, uncanny regenerative speed, monstrous strength output, and adaptive combat transformations are all aspects of his half-demon identity layered atop his human foundation. But because that foundation is human, he still feels things like a human. Dante experiences pain, fatigue, grief, loneliness, and attachment in recognizable human ways. He absorbs punishment that would liquefy a human body, yet he still reacts with visible irritation and pain, reinforcing the idea that his nervous system still processes injury despite his enhanced biological recovery systems. Perhaps the intensity of the pain is dulled to an extent, which could be because of the passive, always-on nature of his healing factor, but it's never eliminated, only turned down a few notches. The game repeatedly shows him wincing, bleeding, slowing down momentarily after sustaining severe damage, or grimacing during impalement. This implies his demonic half doesn't make him invulnerable, it only speeds up the physiological process of damage repair. The reason he shrugs off things like being shot in the head by Lady or impaled by his brother is more psychological, because the impact of shaking off a life-threatening injury like that is more damaging to his opponent's mind, letting them see his pain. And speaking of mindset, what actually happens to his body during Devil Trigger? What's actually fueling his Devil Trigger? The Devil Trigger is Dante's most empowered physiological state in the franchise, and despite what we've just said about his regenerative demonic capabilities, it was triggered the one time when he could have actually died. In DMC3, which is a prologue to the first two games, Dante fights and is defeated by Virgil, who impales him with his own sword, Rebellion. Now, usually Dante doesn't really care about impalement because he knows he can always regenerate from his injuries, but this time it's different. You see, both Yamato and his own sword, Rebellion, are keepsakes passed down to the twin brothers by their father. Yamato and Rebellion possess opposing abilities as well. Yamato severs the dueling essences of existence in this universe. Put it simply, it separates the demonic from the human, and in fact, it was the blade Sparta used to facilitate the severing of the human and demon worlds. But Rebellion unifies those opposing essences to morph their energies into an asynchronous state, and that's exactly what happens to Dante after Virgil impales him with it. Feeling his life slipping away from him, Dante resolved to live by any means necessary to take down his father's evil legacy. This is when he awakened Devil Trigger for the first time. When Dante activates it, his body temporarily shifts from a hybrid human state into a more fully demonic biological form, and this transformation isn't merely cosmetic. Yes, his appearance changes as his eyes glow, he sprouts wings, his skull and skin take on different hues, and an aura-like energy field surrounds his body. There's a lot more to this transformation. Dante's muscle output increases, his regeneration speed becomes instantaneous, his reaction speed spikes, his pain resistance rises, and he even gains the ability to levitate, which he can't do in his base human form. Devil Trigger also affects his behavior. Dante becomes more aggressive and instinctive in combat. The transformation seems to lower the barrier between conscious control and predatory demonic impulse, which in turn makes his combat style more feral and physically overwhelming once his demonic side begins surfacing. This suggests Devil Trigger is a complete systemic rewrite that unlocks his true inherited physiology rather than a simple adrenaline boost. Biologically, the game frames extreme stress as the catalyst that forces his demon genetics to assert dominance over his human limitations. But the narrative adds another layer. Dante doesn't awaken greater power because he embraces being a demon. He awakens it because he discovers something worth protecting. This is evident in the first Devil May Cry game, where he activates Devil Trigger to protect Trish, a demon who looks exactly like his late beloved mother. The franchise repeatedly argues that Dante's humanity amplifies his demonic potential rather than weakening it, which is why he eventually surpasses full-blooded demons, and Virgil is never able to defeat him completely. Sparta himself was feared because he rejected demonic instinct in favor of human empathy, and Dante inherits that paradox from his father. There's also the little matter of Sparta's soul being a part of both his and his brother's physiology. Dante claims as much at the end of Devil May Cry 3. This is proven in Devil May Cry 1, when his devil trigger transforms him into a creature resembling his father more than himself. But there's another factor that influences both their transformations, and all devil triggers in general. Those are devil arms. Devil arms are weapons forged from defeated demons. They're essentially condensed demonic organisms bound into usable forms. When Dante acquires them, his body immediately synchronizes with their energy without rejection, implying his hybrid physiology can metabolize foreign demonic power safely in ways humans never could. We'll go deeper into why that's possible in just a moment. First, we need to talk about the triggers themselves. There's a resonance effect between the external devil arm and Dante's internal psychological state that causes the devil trigger, and this is most evident in the final form of the devil trigger, which is the Sin Devil trigger. Introduced in Devil May Cry 5, the Sin Devil trigger is the ultimate demonic transformation for Dante. An unofficial version of this transformation can be seen in Devil May Cry 2 if Dante activates Devil Trigger at less than 10% health, but this is more of a gameplay bonus than a stable and accessible transformative state. For approximately half of Devil May Cry 5, Dante fights with Rebellion and his regular Devil Trigger till the blade gets shattered by Virgil. Once that happens, he takes into consideration the nature of their two blades, theorizes that by plunging Rebellion into his stomach, he'd be able to merge his human and demonic halves into the ultimate expression of a hybrid being. That theory proves correct when the shattered Rebellion, as well as Sparta, merge with his very essence and unlock his Sin Devil Trigger form, which is much larger, more monstrous, and more powerful than anything Dante had ever exhibited before. His wings grow larger, his horns become bigger, and his entire body transforms to such an extent it would make Humongousaur from Ben 10 feel like gray matter. In his Sin Devil Trigger form, Dante is so powerful that he rivals and even eclipses the Demon King. It's speculated that there's no true ceiling to his strength, save for the ones inbuilt into the game's mechanics. Across the games, the Devil Triggers are never portrayed as infinite or permanent resources. They drain energy during use, replenish over time, and increase in strength through combat, emotional intensity, and demonic exposure. Functionally, they operate like a secondary metabolic system layered on top of his human one, and after engaging in extended combat in his transformed states, Dante appears visibly strained, reinforcing the idea that Devil Triggers consume finite internal reserves. He usually builds up these reserves by absorbing orbs of demonic energy or taking damage depending on the game, but the core philosophy behind transformation remains the same. The difference is that his fuel source is tied to supernatural sources rather than caloric density, though his fondness for calorically dense foods like pizza and ice cream might hint that his human calorie intake influences them to an extent and aren't mere personality quirks. And speaking of quirks, let's talk about a rather interesting side note regarding his Devil Triggers, which is, how did his weapons become part of his biology? For humans, weapons are external tools. For Dante, many of them behave more like biological extensions of his demonic system. The clearest examples are the devil arms. Most beings could never safely interact with their energy, but Dante can not only handle these weapons, he instantly masters and integrates them into his combat style without physical rejection. This implies that his hybrid physiology recognizes demonic energy as biologically compatible tissue rather than foreign matter, synchronizing with them on a genetic and energetic level. And we have to look at things from a magical perspective. You could even say that his use of devil arms suggests that he isn't just merging with them physically, he's absorbing and aligning the souls within him with his own to draw out their maximum potential. In the first 4 games, his Devil Trigger form takes on appearances that are consistent with the type of devil arm he's using. That fight where he becomes more like Sparta? Well, it's because he's wielding his father's eponymous sword. In Devil May Cry 1, Dante uses other devil arms like Alistair and Ifrit, both of which alter his appearance and abilities radically based on the powers and the soul of their original demonic existence. In Devil May Cry 3, this system evolves, and while Dante's base Devil Trigger form remains mostly consistent, its appearance and abilities are slightly altered based on the devil arm he's wielding. Cerberus is an icy 3-pronged nunchuck, Agni and Rudra are fiery twin blades, Nevin is a demonic purple electric guitar, and Beowulf is a set of gauntlets and greaves that use light as its power base. Rebellion is the most important example of this. Throughout the series, Rebellion reacts to Dante's emotional and physical state almost like a living organ. In Devil May Cry 3, resonates with his essence during his Devil Trigger awakening, suggesting that it is attuned specifically to his demonic genetics. By Devil May Cry 5, that relationship becomes fully biological. Dante impales himself with Rebellion and absorbs both the sword and the Sparta blade into his body. This is portrayed less like magical empowerment and more like cellular fusion, as his anatomy restructures itself and unlocks the Sin Devil Trigger, and from this fusion, he creates the new devil sword Dante, an homage to his father's devil sword Sparta, only more fiery and lethal than Sparta ever was. So, while it is true that magic is important in this universe from an anatomical perspective, Dante's use of devil arms can be classified as biological and energetic assimilation. Even his firearms reflect this integration because ebony and ivory are normal pistols from a mechanical standpoint, but Dante uses them in physically impossible ways. He can fire them endlessly without visible recoil damage, channel demonic energy through their bullets, and maintain superhuman precision with them even while executing a physically impossible maneuver like a barrel roll through the skies of hell. All of Dante's weapons are inseparable from his combat identity, to such an extent that his body is treating them like compatible extensions of itself rather than handheld tools. This is the main reason he's a feared and reviled demon hunter in this universe, because he might have a cavalier personality, but his weapons usage is as natural as human instinct. And speaking of humans, why is his hair white? And what does it really mean? Does his body age like a human's? Dante's white hair is one of the earliest visible signs that his body was never fully human. While his wardrobe changes with iterations of his character, usually retaining the overarching aesthetic of a long coat and a red and black color scheme with different cuts and styles, his white hair only changes in style, never color. Dante possesses it even as a teenager in Devil May Cry 3, which tells us that his hair color is a trait he inherited directly from Sparta rather than a result of aging or stress. His appearance physically prevents him from ever fully blending into humanity, because every time someone sees him, they're also seeing Sparta. Plus, his twin brother Virgil and Virgil's son Nero both have that same hair color, reinforcing the idea that they might look like humans, but really, they aren't. The more pertinent question here is about aging, because Dante clearly does age, but at what rate? Roughly 20 to 30 years pass between Devil May Cry 3 and 5, first and last games in the franchise's timeline, and it looks like he's gone from being a 16-year-old boy to a 40-year-old man. Dante appears much younger, leaner, and youthful in DMC3, and in DMC5, he has visible age lines that are consistent with middle age in humans. But here's the kicker. If he inherited his father's hair, did he also inherit his slowed aging process? Because technically, he should have, and his physiology supports that argument. Sparta was active on Earth for 2 millennia before passing away under mysterious circumstances, but in those 2 millennia, he didn't age a lot. He still looked like a man in his physical prime when he fathered Dante and Virgil, although he was clearly older than middle-aged men. Even if Dante, Virgil, and Nero are hybrids, their accelerated regeneration should keep them alive far longer than ordinary human beings, because aging isn't just a psychological concept, it's a physiological process. Aging is the breakdown of cellular integrity in human beings, and factors like stress and trauma accelerate that process immensely. It's why some young folks develop white hair long before their 60s and have age lines on their face as well. But Dante's demonic half operates in a constant passive regenerative state, which means that his old dying cells are regularly being replaced with young healthy ones. If that process lasts indefinitely, or at least for an extended period of time that outpaces human aging, then Dante will theoretically live for several centuries. And even if he doesn't become as old as his old man, at the very least, he will outlive everyone he currently knows. Or at least every human. The fact that his appearance matches his chronological age could be a byproduct of the severe amounts of physically traumatic experiences he's gone through, and for a man born with white hair, changes in hair color can't be used as a reliable indicator of aging. But at least theoretically, Dante should have a much longer lifespan than a human, and retain peak biological functionality for much of that lifespan. But his appearance in Devil May Cry 5 belies that theory, and our best guess is that it's because he's been through a lot more than most people have. But as far as his anatomy is concerned, we hope you enjoyed this video, because that's all we got for you guys. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more devilish content. We'll see you guys soon with yet another video, so until then, stay safe out there and have a fantastic day. We'll see ya in the next one.
You